Good morning to everyone who's tuned in, and welcome, Gary. For those of you who don't know us, I'm Mark Abley, Managing Director here at Fathom, and Gary is one of our financial planners. Fathom is an independent financial advisor firm based in Spennymoor, County Durham, and today in this podcast we're going to chat about the benefits of investing or holding ISAs and why we think everyone should have one. So without further ado, Gary, what's an ISA?
Morning, Mark. So an ISA is an individual savings account. Essentially, it's a tax wrapper that puts a fence around your money so that all of your growth, income or interest that you make is tax-free, and it's tax-free forever.
Sounds pretty good. When were they introduced and why?
Yeah, so Gordon Brown introduced the ISAs back in April 1999. They replaced personal equity plans, which were introduced in 1986 to encourage private individuals to invest in shares. Okay. There were initially a number of restrictions where you could invest your money, but that changed significantly over the years.
And I guess some of us, and we're not going to say who, was actually around in financial services in 1986 and remembers perhaps. I don't know who that would be, Gary. Certainly not me. Is there any limit to how much you can have in an ISA?
Well, you have an annual amount that you can pay into an ISA, and that's £20,000 every tax year, but there's no limit on how much you can hold in your ISA because that's determined by the returns that you're going to make. All
right, I see. Great. So how many ISAs can I have? Can I have more than one in each tax year?
So this is where it gets a little bit tricky because you're only allowed to pay into one of each type of ISA in each tax year, up to your £20,000 annual allowance mark. So you need to make sure that you don't fall foul of the rules. So just to give you an example, you can pay into a cash ISA and a stocks and shares ISA in 1 year, but not into two different cash ISAs. So it is a bit tricky. As you're allowed to have more than one open, you just can't pay into two in the same tax year.
Right, so I can have one that I did last year that's a cash ISA and pay into a cash ISA for this year, but also a stocks and shares ISA.
Correct.
Excellent, great stuff. So you've mentioned two types of ISA, Gary, there, the cash and the stocks and shares. How many different types of ISA are there?
So there's 5 in total. So the cash ISA and stocks and shares ISA, as well as a junior ISA, innovative finance ISA, and a lifetime ISA.
Well said.
I know.
Innovative. Okay. Can you tell us a bit more about them?
Yeah, so just a bit of a run through of all 5. The cash ISA is the most commonly used ISA. It's the one that most people know about and use. It's great for holding an emergency fund. Any of the interest that you receive is tax-free. The downside of a cash ISA is that interest rates have been very low for a long time, so that you're getting on your money isn't matching inflation. So your hard-earned money is actually losing value. If you're looking at interest rates at the moment, Mark, you're probably lucky to get about 1%, compared to over 20 years ago when ISAs were introduced, you could probably get about 7%.
Well, that's a significant difference, isn't it? So I guess what you're saying there, though, Gary, is if I make 1% and inflation is 2%, the purchasing power of my money is going down every year by 1%-ish?
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Spending power.
Okay, grand. And stocks and shares?
Yes, the stocks and shares are the second most common ISA. So if you invest in a stocks and shares ISA, it's giving you the opportunity to achieve growth that's over and above inflation. Right. So you have an option of either investing in single shares that you can choose yourself, or you can buy collective investments that are managed on your behalf, and they could track like an index like the FTSE 100 or something of that nature.
Ah, right. Okay, I see. So are they not risky?
So your investment can go up and down, but if you choose a well-balanced, diversified portfolio and keep your money over the medium to longer term, you'll tend to do pretty well out of it.
Oh, okay. So what type of returns can I expect then from a stocks and shares ISA?
So it's all dependent on the actual investment that you select. But if you look back over the last 20 years or so, the best performing sector, that's been funds in China, and they've actually returned over 800%.
Wow.
But of course, they don't come without risk, and they're not for the faint-hearted. So if you choose, let's say, a balanced investment fund, we probably expect you to see annualized returns of about 5 to 5.5% net of charges. Fortunately, that's not straight line. You don't get that every single year. It's different in different years, but most people who've got investments have experienced that over the last 12 months, let's say, with this recent pandemic.
Yeah. So you're saying an average return of about 5 to 5.5%.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is not too shabby, really. That's pretty. So tell me about this junior ISA then, Gary.
So the junior ISA is where you can save for children or grandchildren. It does have a separate annual allowance. It's £9,000, so that's separate from the 20,000 that I've already mentioned. You can invest in stocks and shares and cash, and the parents or legal guardians of the children can open these, up to 18 years old. But what you need to bear in mind is that the money is the actual child's, so they become legally entitled to it at 18, regardless of whatever the situation is.
Right, so if they're sort of running wild, they're going to get the money anyway, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, that's right.
But just to clarify that, Gary, so I've got 20,000 allowance for myself, but I can contribute up to £9,000 a year for any child of mine under the age of 18.
Yes, that's right.
Right, great. So tell me a little bit about this innovative finance ISA.
The innovative finance ISA, yeah. So this allows you to use your tax-free ISA allowance while you're investing in what's called peer-to-peer lending, P2P lending. And it's where you're investing your money directly. So you're lending your money to borrowers and businesses, and they pay you the capital amount back with interest on top. And it's the interest which is your return. And because it's in the ISA, you're getting that tax-free. Okay.
Right.
So you can, if you open one of these type of ISAs, you're matched up with some borrowers, and the borrowers could be a business, an individual, or somebody who's running a property development or something like that, Mark.
That sounds risky to me.
There can be, because the main risk is that the borrower defaults on the payments, or they don't pay you the money back, and the real fallback position is that you don't have any financial services compensation scheme cover either.
Right.
So they're not for the average investor, let's say.
Okay. And are they provided by specialist firms, Gary, or?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And the lifetime ISA?
So the lifetime ISA is where it's designed for you to buy your own home, your first home, or to invest for the future. Okay. You have an allowance of £4,000 a year, but that's within your actual £20,000 ISA allowance.
Okay.
And if you save into these lifetime ISAs, the government gives you a bonus of 25% on the money that you save.
Right. Okay.
There's some criteria to open one. So you need to be under 40, and you can only contribute up to the age of 50.
Right.
And if you access your money before 60, unless you're buying your first house, then you can lose the bonus. The bonus is taken from you.
Right. Okay. So that's quite a complicated set of rules. So did these replace these Help to Buy ISAs then, Gary?
They did. So the lifetime ISA encompasses the Help to Buy, and it allows people, if they don't want to buy a first home, just to save for the future as well.
Right. Okay. So there's quite a few things to consider, all in all, with ISAs. They're not as simple and straightforward as they first appear.
No, but that's why most people will tend to focus on the first two that we've covered off, which is the cash ISA and the stocks and shares ISA, because they're relatively straightforward and they're easy to understand.
Right. Great. So once I've invested in an ISA and chosen a provider, do I have to stick with them?
No, you can transfer your ISA to wherever you want it to go. The main reasons why somebody might want to do that is, like we mentioned earlier, you might end up with a few different ISAs in different places.
Yeah.
So you might want to amalgamate your ISAs into one easier manageable pot, let's say.
Okay.
You might just be looking for a better investment return than what you're getting at the moment. So go and switch to look for better returns. Or what some people do is, if they've got a cash ISA that they're getting very little interest on and they want a better return, they might transfer that to a stocks and shares ISA.
To potentially get
look for better
return. Great. So here's a question for you, Gary. They've been around for 20-something years now. Are there any people with £1 million in an ISA?
There are some. There was a bit of research done on its 20th anniversary, so in 2019, and it was deemed that at that point there was 250 people with over £1 million in ISAs.
Right. And how much in total do we think that because I mean I guess it's just a guesstimate really, but how much is held in ISAs just across the board?
Yeah, so it's estimated that there's about £8.7 trillion in ISAs, right, which is sheltered from the tax man, and that's supposed to be making a saving of somewhere in the region of about 30 billion.
Right, they're big numbers, and I guess the tax saving is income tax, capital gains tax, and such as that. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
So, are there any other tax benefits to ISAs?
You can try and mitigate against inheritance tax.
All right. Okay. So how does that work?
So to do this, you would need to invest in shares on the what we call the AIM market. So that's the alternative investment market. And most of the companies in this market are actually qualify for business property relief. So it means if you hold the actual investment for 2 years or more, then you're actually exempt from inheritance tax.
Right. Aren't shares a bit scary?
Yes, for the inexperienced investor, there might be. So they typically are for experienced investors, and normally are only considered as part of their wider portfolio. Okay. So you find that these type of investments are more volatile, less liquid, and they're just higher risk than you would normally find on a mainstream investment.
Okay.
So the benefits are, it's within the ISA, so any growth or income is tax free. You get to keep control of your money, and anybody who has an inheritance tax liability, there's a 40% saving to be made there.
Right. Okay. Good. So can you do your own self-invest AIM ISA?
The answer is yes. But the qualifying rules are really difficult, Mark. So you'd have to spend a lot of time as an individual investor to find the actual right companies.
Right.
So we just generally recommend that you use one of the fund managers who are experts in that area.
Great. So we've talked a little bit there, Gary, about estate planning and sort of inheritance, which means that you're no longer around. So when you're not here, what happens to your ISA? If you die, what's then? What's the next step?
Yeah, so if you're married or in a civil partnership, your spouse or your civil partner are entitled to a one-off ISA allowance. So it's called the additional permitted subscription, APS to be shortened, and it allows them to inherit your ISA on death or whenever the ISA is closed if it's later. They do need to complete what's called an APS application form within 180 days of death. It can be extended in certain circumstances.
Great. So it's not an automatic thing. They've got to actually fill in an application form.
You've got to apply for it. Yeah. It doesn't affect their own ISA allowances, though, Mark. And they can apply for it even if they don't end up receiving the ISA when they die. That's
interesting. So I can, if I, for example, passed on and say gave my kids the value of my ISAs, my wife, if she had any cash, could still apply for that allowance and invest her money into. That's pretty good. Right. Pretty good.
That's right. There was another rule that was brought in as well called continuing ISA. It was brought in 2018, and it means whilst an estate is being administered or going through probate after someone's death, it means the money can stay invested in the ISA for up to 3 years.
Right, and I guess that would be quite useful if you were in something like an AIM ISA where the markets had fallen quite dramatically, and it would give it a chance to recover, I guess.
Try. It gets around the timing if the investment's poor at that point.
Excellent. So all in all, there's quite a bit more to your typical ISA than actually meets the eye. You know, we think that just these simple things that we stick some cash into, but there's a lot going on in the background with these things. Gary, thanks for sharing with us this morning. That's been fantastic. I'm sure anybody tuning in will appreciate the knowledge and expertise that you've got in this area. I think that just about wraps it up for now. And thanks to everybody else who's tuned in. Don't forget, the tax year end is upon us. Your ISA allowance is an annual amount that you've got, and you can't carry it forward. So if it's a use it or lose it, if you don't use it in this tax year, you've lost the opportunity to do it, and you've got your allowance next year. If you have any questions or queries related to ISA or any other investment, please feel free to get in touch. The usual number, 0800 043 8341. Or email letstalk@fathomfinancial.co.uk. We've got some other podcasts coming up in the future. There'll be a webinar on inheritance tax and an In Conversation with Tom Hind from Stellar Asset Management, to mention just two. We'll give you plenty of notice in advance if you'd like to tune in. But once again, thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.